I might flap once, but I won't let you flap twice. This is flap culture. Welcome to Flop Culture, the very first episode where we talk about our favourite flops, bops, celebrity culture, everything in between. I am absolutely terrified. Nobody can see me. You obviously can hear me. I am profusely sweating. I'm so excited to be back, but obviously very nervous because it's very new. Doing it on your own, very stressful, very fun. But I am very genuinely delighted to be back. This is, and has been, and will continue to be, a very fun project. I'm very happy to have you on board with me on this journey. I hope you enjoy. I don't think every episode is going to be for everyone, but they're the podcasts that I kind of like. And also, you might see a title and you're like, I'm not interested in that. And then you listen and you'll find out you actually are. Because what is a flop at the end of the day? Flop was kind of more originally associated, with box office failures, I think, back in the day. It actually dates back to the 1800s, the late 1800s, when it was first used to mean a failure, which is insane to me. But now it's kind of taken on this entirely new definition, which my first guest on this episode actually gets into really well, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But, we have a lot of love for flops. It's not all about commercial success anymore. It's not all about critical success. We have our flops that really aren't flops at all because they do well commercially. We just love them. Maybe they don't do as well as we think they should, and that's why they're flops. And we say it as a term of affection. And that's one thing I really want to make clear. I'm so up for a constructive little chat, a healthy debate, if you will. But flop is not a value judgment. As Talisa, the female boss, says, it's just fun. This podcast, it's just fun. And I'm saying that now because I feel like this week's pick, it's going to divide people. It's going to divide people. But as I said, my guest is incredibly capable at justifying their choice and is an incredible guest. And I cannot wait to have them back. But before we get into this week's flop, let's take a look at the news, shall we? What a week it's been. What a week and a half it's been. Quite selfish of the celebrities and, everything else to implode the week I said I was going to, rejoin the podcasting universe. Incredibly selfish. But anyway, there's a couple of things that I was debating about getting into. The Don't Worry Darling thing. I think we'll come back to it when there's a new update on that because I just feel like, that's a flap in itself now, really, isn't it? But anyway, let's revisit it. Maybe we'll do a field trip to the cinema to watch it all together and to see Harry do his, if you get this opportunity, do that accent. Mine was kind of better, I think. Hire me. Olivia Wilde. She probably doesn't want to get me though, so. Ox. Anyway, we're not talking about Don't Worry Darling. We are going to start off with another titan of podcasting returning after a mere 2 episodes, an episode and a half, a trailer and a holiday special. Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle is back with the podcast. She's actually 2 episodes in now at this point. Her first episode with the incredible Serena Williams, a friend of hers. And the most recent episode, Mariah Carey. Mimi, she's here. She's ready to chat. The whole concept of Meghan's podcast is around archetypes. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce that. Like how we perceive different types of women, predominantly female identifying people. And obviously she gets into the whole idea of being a diva with Mimi. And it's a very funny conversation because, I love getting to hear an extended chat with Mariah. It's not something we get. It's something we shouldn't take for granted. But also Mariah's funny, you know what I mean? And she has her little, well, depending on what you read, people are reading into it as a dig. I don't think it's a dig. It was just her being like playful, fun, whatever. And also telling the truth because at one point, they're talking about, I think Meghan's talking about not really relating to being a diva or whatever. They're talking about Mariah's diva reputation. And she's talking about how it's a persona. I think that's really important for people to remember that there might be this persona. And yes, this diva thing we can play into. It's not something I connect to, but for you, it's been a huge part of and then Mariah's like, I'm going to stop you right there, Meghan. I'm going to stop you. I'm going to stop you right there, Miss Former Princess. And she said, you give us diva moments sometimes, Meghan. And then Meghan's like, I do not. Excuse me. What kind of diva moments do I give you? Which I mean, hilarious given that this is coming from, let's say again, a former Duchess on a Spotify exclusive podcast, currently living in a $14 million home. You know what I mean? And someone actually wrote this better than I would, Kevin Fallon for the Daily Beast. He kind of went into, I think Meghan, it's good that she did this podcast and interrogated the meaning of diva, because I think she still has really negative connotations surrounding the word. And Mariah's the perfect example of someone who kind of took that negativity and spun it into, this comedic persona that she also has, and kind of being in on the laugh as well. But I still don't think there's a disconnect there for Meghan. But anyway, Kevin Fallon of the Daily Beast wrote about it, and, about the fact that, why didn't she get it? Because, it's Markle's narrative is that of the diva. And in all the positive ways that she and Kerry had just spent 45 minutes explaining, she claims her power. She is a disruptor. She is often marginalised, refuses to settle, has a legion of fans who fall over her every move. It's not diva behaviour in the way of Miss Piggy, but in the modern sense that the podcast is celebrating. She was a little-known TV actress who married a prince. Then she convinced him that royal life wasn't best suited for them, breaking centuries of tradition and sparking a veritable international crisis. She's a diva. Fighting with Piers Morgan, diva behaviour, but in the best way. I don't fall too heavily on either side of liking or loathing Meghan, I suppose, or and I think it's really hard to have a conversation around this with it. And I know it's different for them now because they've left, but I feel if you try to have any kind of intense conversation around it, it's you're a Brit licker, she's a Brit licker. But there's something very fascinating about it because they've left, because she was literally Rachel on Suits. She was a celebrity. She ran a lifestyle blog, became famous, has left, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that. That's endlessly fascinating if you're interested in celebrity and pop culture at large. So you don't have to be a big up the royals. Why would you be anyway? What a demented family. Anyway, but also then, whose side are you going to be on? Meghan versus the Queen? Who's picking the Queen? Who is picking the Queen? Who is a stan of the Queen? I don't even want to know. Anyway, this has gone totally deranged. Meghan has also done a profile for The Cut, which is a very interesting read. I will leave all of these in the show notes for anyone who wants to dig into them themselves. Quite interesting. I'm still kind of none the wiser as to who she is, which I suppose is the point for her. You know what I did find interesting? She's teased her return to Instagram. She did immediately retract it, but initially she was to the reporter, she was hey, come here, I got a secret. She's this with her finger hey, I'm going to tell you something. I'm coming back to Instagram. I might come back to Instagram. And let me tell you, fair play, because you know what we need more of? Sketch comedians. Killian Sunderman, you should be shaking. Watch your back. Watch your back. Elsewhere, we're getting a new Taylor Swift album, her 10th, Midnights. She announced it at this year's VMAs after winning for Best Long Form Video for All Too Well, 10-minute version, Taylor's version, 1873, whatever the hell, add as many brackets as you want. That's the title of the song. Comes out October 21st. She's described the new album as a collection of music written in the middle of the night, a journey through terrors and sweet dreams, which is giving me very Leaving Cert English. It's giving me comparative. It's giving, there's a whole longer description that I was going to read for this podcast. I'm just not going to do it. You can find it yourself on Google and maybe just cringe. Maybe just cringe a little bit. And I say that as a Swiftie. I say that as someone who has covered an album of hers for this podcast later on in the series. Tease, hint, there you go. Stay tuned for that. I love her. I love her music. I really do. She's another celebrity that I just find endlessly fascinating. How could you not? But there is, it's hard work, you know what I mean? Even these theories around this album now, because obviously this is her first original release since Evermore. She's released albums since, but they've been re-recordings of her past albums. I'm not getting into the label thing now. There are podcasts, essays, articles, go into it. She's re-recording all her old albums because of a past legal dispute. I think people thought that The next Taylor's version was going to be 1989 because there were singles off it. You know, you had Wildest Dreams. This Love actually was released alongside The Summer I Turned Pretty. So people are like, it's going to be 1989, it's going to be 1989. But no, this is all new music, which is very exciting. But like, exhausting work. Like, she needs to be lobotomized and investigated for science, as does every Swiftie on the planet. Because like, she is one of these people... She breadcrumbs everything. Nothing is an accident. She is as calculated as the Kardashians, which is why I think they all hate each other. That's another podcast for another day. She's a meticulous planner. And if you're a Swiftie, you're constantly looking out for these things and these signs. And you're like, what's going on? What is she talking about? Like, who could this be? And it's like, there's a gem on her leg. And, you know, she did this on the 13th. And that was to commemorate the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. Like, it's just endless, right? But this theory I do think is interesting and probably the most believable, because I've seen other things on TikTok, you know, where it's like, oh, I think this is going to be her last album, because there's some references to the fact that, I suppose, Lover ends on daylight, and it kind of goes into this. And I think she'd hinted before there being like a blue equivalent to Lover, and this seems to be in a more blue colour scheme. But anyway, I'm not... Just one TikTok isn't a primary source. That's all I'll say. I'm a history teacher now. I'm delighted. Basically, one fan has found, if you go onto the Spotify, I think it is, there's something... Oh, yes. One fan, and it's at Laws of Nature, but it's spelled like nature, if that makes sense. They, on some social media platform, they noticed that on the Spotify, there's like a countdown clock ticking to midnight for Taylor Swift's music on Spotify. And the clock, all the numbers have different... They're different colours, basically. And she reckons that each colour... Sorry, I'm assuming it's a she. I'm actually not sure, so I'm going to take that back. But they reckon each colour represents an era, a Taylor Swift era. So, like, some of the numbers are green for her debut album, blue is for 1989, red is for Red, yellow for Fearless, yada, yada, yada. So they reckon that Midnights, because they said it's taken over the course of her life, so they reckon that each song is taken from kind of a certain era from those albums and those points in her life. I'm so tired even just thinking about that. We could solve the climate crisis if Taylor Swift and her fans came together and just used their enormous noggins, just rubbed them together and created some kind of friction. Something could happen. But alas, Taylor loves getting planes everywhere, so that's not going to happen, unfortunately. And then finally, sad breakup news. Leonardo DiCaprio and Camilla Morone, whatever, they have broken up. Because Leonardo DiCaprio is only interested in you if your frontal lobe isn't fully formed, of course. She is the latest girlfriend to kind of reinforce this pattern that he seems to have of only dating women up until they're 25. And then after that, he's like, absolutely not. Too old for me, I'm afraid. He'd be watching the X Factor and he'd be trying to vote against the over 25s. He was like, Ollie Murs, just getting sick. They'd been together for 5 years when she was 20. That's interesting. He's 47 now. You do the maths there. It's been said that over the summer the actor and model grew apart, but fans have speculated that their breakup comes after the model turned 25. Leonardo has famously never dated anyone publicly over the age of 25. So there you go. It's definitely not a casual relationship, this when they were going out. Camilla spends a lot of time at his house. Thanks, source. Camilla is long known as Leo's girlfriend, and Leo introduced her to both of his parents long ago. Okay, fair enough. Speaking about their 22-year age gap previously, Camilla said there are so many relationships in Hollywood and in the history of the world where people have large age gaps. I just think anyone should be able to date who they want to date. Daily Mail has a very funny headline this week that says, a look back at Leonardo DiCaprio's history of only dating women 25 or under. Previous dating history obviously includes Blake Lively, Bara Fieli, Giselle Bundchen. They all broke up before they were 25. So there you go. I don't fall in that category anymore. I'm 27. He looks at me like a stinking aging hunk of cheese, like that lunch that's gone mouldy in the back of your fridge that you meant to take to work and you just keep forgetting and you're like, I can't even face it to throw it out. That's me. If Leonardo DiCaprio ever made eye contact with me, that's what he would see. Anyway, I think that's more than enough of that. That has been the news this week. Finally, I think I've kept you long enough. Let's get into who is top of the flops this week.
You're a flop.
Top of the flops this week for me, I mean, it has to be Lisa Rinna, really, doesn't it? some Housewives fans, Bravo fans, they're convinced that she's been dropping a lot of hints that she has been fired, maybe left the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. That is kind of something I welcome, if I'm going to be totally honest. But I'll get into that a bit later on. This has basically come off the back of, you know, there's been a lot of argy-bargy the last few while with other castmates, specifically Diana and Garcelle, and the fallout of that, and Botgate. So basically, they were kind of feuding online, Garcelle and Diana. Garcelle Beauvais and Diana Jenkins, in case you're like, who the hell are you talking about? I just assume everyone watches Real Housewives of Beverly Hills here. And then Lisa Rinna and Erica Jane got involved. Diana was basically accusing Garcelle of taking the piss out of her pregnancy loss. Garcelle denies this, said, you know, it was just about the fact that you couldn't get my name right. Again, you're not going to get this in the context of the episode, or unless you watch the episode, but just for context. And basically then since, you know, Diana was kind of like game on in the sense of the feud. And then we had Garcelle's son being targeted by loads of like near identical kind of public IG accounts that all looked very similar. The consensus is that these were all bots and they were bought to harass Garcelle's son, direct racist attacks at him, death threats, really, truly awful things. Bravo was forced to speak out. Well, not forced, they should have, after a lot of pressure from the fan base. The rest of the castmates came out and said, look, this isn't acceptable. They all kind of reshared the blanket statement. But like, to be honest, Rinna has kind of just been on one since then. I think at one point she said that she reckons, you know, like, I think at one point she accused a producer of orchestrating the attack, which is just absolutely insane. And I think at another point she accused former castmate, has not been on in years, again, for context, Lisa Vanderpump, of orchestrating the attacks to distract from upcoming scenes in which Kathy Hilton is seemingly gets into trouble when they go to Aspen. Something happens in Aspen. We still don't know yet what actually went on in the context there. But I think her time has come. And I feel like maybe this is going to be an unpopular opinion. I kind of don't care. I really do think her time has come. I think she did bring a lot to the franchise. I think she's had some cracking funny moments. She brought drama where it was needed, but I think she's been riding on that legacy, the legacy of Amsterdam, other things like that. And I think that's all well and good, but when that well runs dry, what then? And I just feel like there's been a lot of weird behaviour like this. I think it's time. I'd be open to her coming back, but there's no acceptance of what she's doing. There's no acknowledgement of behaviour. It's just it's kind of getting borderline hard to watch for me personally. So regrettably, Lisa Rinna is top of the flops for me. Who would you like to see replace her? I know there's been talk this week of Kimora Lee Simmons. Well, not necessarily replacing Lisa Rinna. Also, sorry, the rumours are that Page Six had reports that she's a part of the show still for, like, there's no word on her actually leaving. I think it's time. I think if she hasn't left / been fired, I think it's time for her. I would love Kimora Lee Simmons to join. I think she was dropping hints on her Instagram recently. That would be very exciting. Ashley Simpson, I think I've talked about before. I think I've spotted her in photos with Kyle or something. I would enjoy that quite a lot. But yeah, time's up, you know? Give me something else. There's only so many Instagrams I can watch of you writhing around. That's all I'll say. And that's not, you know, we all have our limits. Girls, gays and theys. Anyway, I think that's all we have time for Flap Culture this week. I have, as I said, sweated through my entire shirt, so that's great, isn't it? Thank you so much for listening. We are on Instagram and TikTok under flapculture_pod, and you can get in touch at helloflapculture@gmail.com. If you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and your name or nickname, I will recommend a bop or flap to you. If you leave a 5-star review on Spotify, you will have eternal smugness, which is even better, really. Hugely appreciated, and it helps get the podcast out there, and also tell your friends. As I said, if you weren't into this episode, totally fine. You've no idea the variety of the stuff we're talking about this season. It's incredible, and it's so much fun, and I have such great guests, and I'm really, 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 really excited. I will see you all next week. This podcast has been edited by Adam Shanahan.
flop.